I think children they're super wise. They're the guru. So they'll see through the bullshit. Like, you can't fool a child.
Yeah.
Especially before they have a lot of conditioning. They'll ask questions. Why? What is this? Why?
I've selfishly been looking forward to this conversation for a little while now, because this amazing, handsome human being has come onto my radar through a couple of mutual friends actually right now. And I want to just dive into some things that are very topical for myself. Obviously, I think culturally as well, it's extremely topical, but also extremely helpful for what it is that you do. But before we dive in, dude, I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you for coming in.
Appreciate you having me. It's
I
an
think
honor.
you've dodged some amazing rain so far, or you didn't get too wet coming in. So
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Bali's weather held up for us. So let's skip the foreplay and go straight for it if you're cool and down for it. What do you see as the roles for when it comes to men and women, masculine and feminine, and how do we actually start to make some sense of what so many people are going on about today?
Totally. I mean, the mind fuck of this issue is that if we could sit in front of our ancestors, right, like, go a couple thousand generations back, this wouldn't even be a question because of the world they lived in, which, fair enough, was super dangerous. They didn't have Uber Eats, they didn't have taxis driving them around. But the roles for men and women are in the DNA, they're instinctual. Obviously, there's a lot of fluidity and freedom now, but the core energetics are still there. And one of my mentors, an amazing man in the European men's movement, Alexander Bard, he kind of gives the best rap on this that I kind of like to borrow from. And he talks about the circuits of a village, right? Or the circuits of a tribe. You can look at it like a structure, like a mainframe. The inner circuit's run by the feminine, by women. Who's the best at nurturing social cohesion, intelligence, empathy, knowing who's related to who, how to distribute resources and attention. I mean, this is the mother, this is the grandmother, the medicine woman, the oracle. So they are amazing at running that game, the inner circuit of the village. Who runs the outer circuit? Well, the masculine. Who's doing trade, war, who's doing vision, provision, and protection? Is the masculine. The chieftain, the hunters, the shaman, he's tracking the outer circuit of the village. And obviously this works better in like a Dunbar's number, which you've heard of, like 150 people that our brain can literally emotionally track and relate to. I mean, now we have social media with, 150 million people talking, and we have these busy cities. So a lot of this stuff gets lost in the noise. But at the core, what is the masculine the best at? He's the best at leading, initiating, protecting, and providing. And in relationship to the feminine, he then gets to help her become her best self in connection and symbiosis. So what's she best at? Nurturing, intuition, being an oracle, a queen, and a nurturer, and a Shakti or Orosz force. I like the Orosz Logos dichotomy. And this can take any flavor. This applies to non-binary folks, same-sex couples. The same energetics there. And I think if you look at any successful couple, and obviously you probably know a lot as a father, this has to be in place for love to thrive.
Why do you think there has been a throwing up of the ideology of what the man and woman, masculine and feminine, should be today?
This is a deep question. I actually wrote a post on this recently. There's a great quote, I forget the guy's name, but it's basically never attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence or ignorance. Yeah. So I think that has a lot to do with it. However, I do think there's some weird stuff going on with confusion, de-emphasizing gender, saying, gender doesn't matter, it's all fluid, these are social constructs. There's this narrative that's really hot right now. It's very trendy. And to me, it's like, oh, okay, if these media platforms and these systems of information distribution want me to see that, which is clear, then it's like, who stands to gain? Just Occam's razor logic. Yes. So it's like something weird's going on. But we don't need to go into the rabbit holes. I think on a basic level, I mean, again, about survival, there's the church worldwide, all different kinds of churches, which was deeply invested in the family unit, how men and women show up. There's also the rise of nation states and now the corporate state. Okay, we need good citizens and workers. So they had an agenda to be like, okay, how does the family play out? So all of those pressures, now that the world's connected by the internet, are seen, often rightly so, as oppressive forces, or forces that like limited the voices of the feminine and structured or conditioned the work of the masculine. So it's like, you're gonna go to job, you're gonna work 40 hours, 50 hours a week, your wife's gonna do this, here's how it works, right? The little 1950s, like, you know, stereotypical housewife and man. And people are, it's, you know, it's physics. There's an equal and opposite force rushing in the other direction. Me Too, you know, the rise of the women's movement, third, fourth wave feminism, you know, take your pick. There's a huge impetus to be like, fuck all this. These are boxes. I don't want to be in the box. That's sacred.
Yep.
Now, if you throw the baby out with the bathwater and go into, there's no meaningful differences between men and women. What is a woman? Well, we can't define that. Let's not, what is a man? Well, that's not, you know, now we're getting into territory that, you know, you got to think about a 7-year-old growing up in 2022, and his teacher can't even define what a woman is, you know, biologically or otherwise. To me, that is not what we need as humanity right now. I believe we need men and women, full power, in love, sovereign, connected, clear. We don't need to muddy the water. So I do believe there's something of a war or some kind of, you know, war is a strong word. Flip war around, it's just raw. So it's just, there's a really intense raw energy in the field that doesn't seem to enjoy men and women being sovereign and knowing who they are.
I really appreciate you communicating that so clearly. And I was actually recently reading The Sovereign Individual, that you just said the word sovereign and just sparked that, and they were talking about how the breakdown of nation states is such a big thing that is happening during this time as well, and then deducting that down into the family unit also. Being a father currently right now of a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an 8-month-old, all girls, what advice would you have for me to be able to best help the girls have an understanding of themselves and what's happening? And almost then my next leading question would be, how would you best advise me as a father and as a man so that I can best be who I need to be for them?
Yeah, I love this question, and you know, humbly I can give my perspective, but I'm not a father yet. I plan to be one day. You know, we spoke about it before we hit record. I think the ultimate thing you can do is to be the best, most integrous man you could be, who you want to be a type of man that they would want to marry and be with, right? So they can look at you, you're the imprint of the masculine archetype for them, and then they're like, oh, well, like, this guy isn't on par with my dad, you know, I'm not gonna share my life with him or open up to him. So I think that's a big piece. And then the other side would be your wife, your queen. If you're treating her with the utmost respect, love, creating safety for her so she can blossom in her energy, then she's gonna imprint the feminine archetype onto them at the highest level. So if they're in question or they come up against struggles, which they undoubtedly will, they can look to their mother and be like, wow, this is what a strong, sovereign woman looks like. So they have models to play off of, right? And then, you know, I think children they're super wise. They're the guru. So they'll see through the bullshit. Like, you can't fool a child.
Yeah.
Especially before they have a lot of conditioning. They'll ask questions. Why? What is this? Why? And so you just nurture that. You don't try to, like, you know, change it.
Yep. No, I love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We were talking just before as well, and I think this is a good example that I see, in just speaking from my experience as well, from selling my company. One of the great things that I see that happened was Lauren, my wife, was in the business working with like account and administration side of things, and that being a very masculine role for what that actually was, and her now not doing that, her literally saying, and me seeing so much of her just softening into her feminine, and it just being this blossoming that has just been awe-inspiring for me to be able to witness her being able to go through this transition and show up each day. I can hear the difference in how she speaks to me, in how she speaks to our daughters, in just the way that she's been each and every day as well. And I said to you, I go, I actually feel bad. There is a negative emotion that I'm having because I wasn't able to have the awareness to be able to see that happening to her before. And me wanting to be able to best serve my queen and best show up and be the man for her, and obviously to protect her and to be able to go out into the world and conquer and bring back for her and be able to do those things, I was like, oh, I wasn't as aware as I would like to have been. I have a lot of people say, well, like, you're really aware, Chris, and do you mean like your thinking process and all of these kind of stuff? And I'm like, yeah, it's okay, but it's not great, which is why I appreciate so much when I'm able to sit and be with another man and to be able to have reflection upon, and someone that will press against me, someone that will help me evolve and grow. And that's why when I get to be able to be with men like yourself, I'm like, oh, fantastic. Like mountaintop sees mountaintop scenario. When you're working with other men, how do you help cultivate the awareness with them so that then they're able to navigate forwards?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. I think he's kind of carrying the global men's conversation on his back, you know, as is beautiful. And he's a mentor. He's a father archetype for a lot of people. And you know, what he lays out is something that's deeply impacted me. And I think most men, I'd say 95% of the men I talk to instantly get it. They don't need a lot of explanation. It's that challenge is good. Stress, eustress, which is productive stress, is good. Meeting your masculine edge is good, right? And being an entrepreneur, being a coach, it's like I live in that. So to me, it's like kind of like breathing or swimming in water. It's just like, it's all the time. Men that are more in what we might call the mainstream, you know, work, eat, sleep cycle, home life, work balance cycle, they often have shielded themselves from that challenge for whatever reason, for good reason too, maybe. But helping them get back into the work, right? What is your edge? A lot of men, it's intimacy, it's the feminine, it's dating, it's their marriage. A lot of men, it's just their purpose. They actually don't feel good about what they spend most of their time doing, which is very vulnerable because for a man, his mission, dharma, purpose, it's one of the core things. You're gonna have to orient towards it. It can be gardening. You can be a single dad. You could be, you know, an accountant. It doesn't need to be grandiose, but it needs to be met and given its due. And the other thing is a lot of men just are struggling with their health. You know, I think, you know, you're a strong guy. You know, a lot of guys out there neglect health and just fitness or training, discipline. So those are kind of the core buckets. But, you know, I just will lovingly, but also not coddling him, challenge the man and just call out, you know, this is really what a lot of the coaching is and what I've developed and been really good at and also been called out myself by my mentors is just, hey man, what are you not looking at? What are you avoiding right now? Where are you, like, you know, one of the most painful things you can imagine is on your deathbed, you meet the man you could have become and he walks up to you and like, you know, he's like, this is what I achieved, this is what I bled for, what I cried for. And, you know, the gap between you and that man can be addressed today. You can start addressing it today. And I think a lot of men, once they get over the initial shock of that, they love it. And then instantly their energy will turn around, their expression will enliven. And I think that's what you love to see.
From my experience, there was a case of truly grasping the responsibility needed, but also the understanding that comes from a equanimity when knowing, and I like knowing, not like K with knowing like a gnosis, a G, like inside knowing. And it's actually why I've got two quotes on my walls here. One that I can't actually see for the lights in the way, but from Zen master Ikkyo Sojun. And it says, throw me into hell and I'll find a way to enjoy it. And I literally put that there closest to my desk actually, because I want to be able to look up at the times and to be able to feel the fire, feel the wrath, be in the situation and go like, I'm going to forge my path through this. I'm going to be okay. And obviously being able to rely on, say, certain philosophical concepts that help me get through that path. But I liked where that was pointing. And then Marcus Aurelius says, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. And that just being the fundamental principle for me, I want to be my best self, and I want to be the person that I respect and admire. And at the end of every day, truly, consciously, and as objectively I possibly can, actually coming back to that point as well and being able to operate that. Because it's my hope, and please push back against any and all of this, but it is my hope that having that as a bit of a process behind it stops me from bullshitting myself. Because I think that's I forget the quote, whoever it says, but we are the easiest person to like lie to, do you know what I mean? To bullshit to, and trying to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. These are two of my favorite men. I mean, EQ, the legendary Zen poet, and Marcus Aurelius, who I think, Ryan Holiday has obviously popularized Stoicism, and there's a movement now of men realizing that, if you bullshit yourself, if you live for someone else or you live someone else's vision, this is for me, like I was blessed with this itch or this edge where like I couldn't stand it. So that's why I couldn't, I was going to go into academia. I couldn't do it. I hated living in someone else's dream. Like I was born an entrepreneur, visionary artist. I can't not do this. For a lot of men, they may not be called in that way. However, they know when they're living someone else's vision, and there's that quiet voice that is relentless, and they know it. And so if you bullshit that voice long enough, it will break you. There's no way around it. And there's no sugarcoating it. So I would agree, like it's very easy to bullshit yourself. For a season, you may have to.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
But just don't forget that like the bill will come due. The longer you put it off, the harder it is to like shift back towards your North Star.
The one big epiphany that I had that actually got me to want to sell and then sell the business actually was me coming to this phrase. It was like, I want to be more, I don't want to have more. And understanding and surrendering to me being like, I've evolved past what I'm doing, which comes to the point of you like brought up just before, which was knowing what I want, purpose. I was not aligned with the purpose that I felt like I had evolved into. And there was a stress, a strain, a struggle with that misalignment with who I was being and what I was doing on a day-to-day level. And each and every day it was gnawing at me, just eating at my soul. Having gone through that, I now look upon this and I reflect back on how do I best know what I want and what is truest to myself? Because I do believe, do you know what I mean, that we are mimetic creatures. There is, like, as Renee Girard talks to, do you know what I mean, like the outside influence of the environment and the people around me. And a great example of this is being here in Bali. I can have a $5 a day bike and be like totally pumped with it, like totally happy. 3 days in Australia, the US or whatever, and I'm like, do I want a G-Wagon or a Land Rover? It's just like, what the hell? And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't even wear shoes. Like, the only time I wear shoes is literally going into the gym so they can let me into the place. And so I find it really interesting, and I'd love to know, how do we best navigate ourselves, understanding of mimesis, but yet staying true and aligned with ourselves? How do we traverse through that?
I love where your head's at. I mean, I love Gerard's work, and mimesis is so fascinating. For those who aren't familiar, like it's monkey see, monkey do. You want what other people want, and there's a collective thought form, which we might even call an egregore, which is like a collective energy of desire, which this is the whole idea that like, the job, the car, the wife, the house, that will fulfill you when you get that for the masculine, right? This is the quest. I'll be free when, I'll feel this when, and this is a lie. The process is more valuable than the goal, although goals are great because we need to orient towards direction. For me, I am more of the left-hand path and more of the tantric path, and the classic Joseph Campbell, like follow your bliss. If you only follow your bliss, you might end up like EQ, just drinking wine under the moonlight, writing poetry, and not having a dime to your name. Most men aren't going to do well in that. That being said, like, Joseph Campbell has this epic rap about the Grail Knights under King Arthur, and it's like, all right, if you're going to go on the quest for the Holy Grail, which every man must, right? Which is what is yours to do. We can call it kuleana. The Hawaiians have this word, like what is yours to do. It's also captured by Dharma. He or she, the knight or knightess, must enter the forest of darkness, the unconscious, the hero's journey, at the point at which it appears darkest to them, or what draws them, right? So there's a polarity there between bliss, what you're most desiring, what you most want, and the darkness, of the abyss, which is what you're most avoiding. And so in that interplay, there's your map. That's where you start. Now, as soon as you take a step, it's gonna change, and there's gonna be chaos. There's gonna be twists and turns. So you came in this life with gifts. Everyone came equipped with gifts. There's something that you're amazing at, and if you don't know what it is, I mean, Gary Vee raps about this all the time. Go ask the 5 people closest to you. Go ask your wife or husband. Go ask your best friends and colleagues. You might not even know how good you are at what it is because you have unconscious competence. You're just so good at it that people around you will be able to tell you. It's like, hey, like, and ideally, if you can align that with your expertise, skills, and how you make money or how you go towards purpose, obviously that may take 20 years to align, but if you follow that confluence, you're going to be well set up.
Okay, there's 2 threads I want to pull on here, and this is really fascinating to me. Talking to that point of like going out and asking others and being able to get the feedback from the world, I found really interesting me going through this transition right now. It was only a couple of weeks ago. I've just had like other entrepreneurs, colleagues reach out and be like, hey, help me with this. I'll jump on a quick Zoom call. And I was on a call with Callum, an amazing dude in Australia, and we jump on this quick call, and he goes, hey, I've got this problem. And essentially what I could quickly see is he was trying to solve this problem, but he actually had this other problem completely over here that was causing it. And he was literally trying to solve the wrong thing. And I just became aware of that and kind of like told him, hey, I actually think it's this because of these reasons why. Had this conversation. 20 minutes tops is probably what we were talking about. My wife was in the background doing some things and she could hear the entire conversation. I get off the call and like I'm beaming, like I had a great time on this chat, and she goes, this is what you should be doing. Like she was like, this is what you should be doing. And she was like, ask Callum if that was actually helpful to him. And so I sent him a voice note on WhatsApp and I was like, dude, do you actually think that was helpful, like what we were doing? And he goes, dude, that just added hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to the business. Like that was mind blowing. It was very nice feedback. And I was like, okay, cool. And I just was like, oh wow, like I didn't even know that, because something else I've had other great friends reflect back to me, because I've asked this question, especially like me right now. I was like very fortunately in a space to be like, well, what do I do for the rest of my life? I don't have to work for money anymore. I can now operate, which is hilarious because literally since closing date of the sale, I've worked more than months before that. But I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing, this being a big part of it as well.
Right.
And a couple of people came back with the exact same thing, and I was like, your emotional range is so good. And I was like, oh, that was like, a fish doesn't know that it's in water. A fish is the last one to know that it's in water, and someone's got to point that out for it as well. So I love that you say that. And one thing that I have been not struggling with, but wanting to answer is we have a Taoist point of view of the world where, let's say, this is all a play, and we have a role to play in this lifetime, for example. And then we have kind of on the other side of the pendulum, I see like a fatalistic point of view, where it's like, oh, sorry, then we have the roles play, and it's like fatalistic, we have everything. And then there's the other point of view of like, no, you can completely do whatever it is that you want at the end of the day. You have free will, free choice, all of these things. And for me, having gone through life thus far, I've come to a point of understanding that Lady Fortune plays an immense role of what it is that we do, and how things have just rolled out the way the cookie crumbles at the end of the day. Yet I like to have the idea or the concept that I have control of what is happening, and that is quite illusionary of what control is. And us as humans want certainty, and what I also see with entrepreneurs, some of the best entrepreneurs, I think a common trait is they're able to suspend this need for certainty as well. So when it comes with this pendulum right now, I just love to know what your thoughts are with this and how we best weave through this, because you said something that I thought was really brilliant. It's like you're more on the left side, whereas more on you can follow the bliss and this is what you're going to do. Because that, I think that comes from you understanding there's a spectrum right now. And at this moment in time, you're here on this spectrum and you're able to come to and understanding the acceptance of where that is. What are your thoughts before I keep jabbling on?
No, I mean, you're speaking to my heart and my philosophic North Star here on what I love to ponder and also why I love coaching. Coaching in particular allows me to play in this battlefield, this playground. Now for me, to your last point quickly, the only reason I'm aligned with following my bliss is because that's how I got here. I could be at an office right now somewhere filing paperwork and doing research studies in academia, which is what I thought I was going to do. But I literally trust falled, lived on savings, traveled the world, was like, what the fuck, read the 4-Hour Work Week, did all this crazy shit that logically on paper, it's like, this makes no sense. You had a whole lifeline this way. And I just built wings on the way down. And that's how I did it. I don't recommend everybody do that. You are in an amazing situation because you've released the pressure of needing to monetize or needing to work for money. You don't need to trade your time for money anymore, which obviously initiated a death process because the old identity and the structures you built grew in that environment. So almost like you're shedding skin, you had to release that. Now, and there's a few perspectives again that I hold that I think could be valuable. Now you have an amazing ability to dance between that spectrum you described, between Lady Fortune, Amor Fati, loving your fate and destiny, just because there are certain things, again, you came in this life with. Whether you believe in multiple lives or spiritual destiny, doesn't really matter. To me, it's pretty much fact and objective that you're good at certain things, you're not good at other things. You could spend your whole life working on the weaknesses and becoming well-rounded. Some people do that. The greats, the Michael Jordans, the Michael Jacksons, the GOATs, the greatest of all time, they just went all in on what they're good at. So if you can identify that, that's a force factor right there. Which, having known you for all of an hour, I think, emotional intelligence, asking brilliant questions, being highly analytical, and your energy is palpable already. So right away, I'm like, okay, I understand why you built a successful coaching business. I understand why you love doing this, because you're just having creative conversations that are going to catalyze insight in you and others, which is a massive service to humanity. So that's one bucket, just straight practical. The other bucket's synchronicity. So you can take the mystical approach that we are souls in these human bodies and we're here to perform some kind of mission. Maybe there's galactic alliances rooting us on. There's that whole worldview. You can take the quantum physics worldview, Look at reality. Literally all protons and all matter is literally connected through like micro wormholes and 13 dimensions of string theory. There's math to prove that right now. We've known about that since the 20s. Doesn't matter to me. Coincidence, there's no such thing. Synchronicity is a KPI. What you're interested in, who you meet. Think of someone they text, get a call on your friend, your wife's like, you should do this. Hey, was that, Life is constantly showing you through this magical thing we call coincidence, where your energy's headed and where it is best used in the field. Because it's intelligent. So God or whatever is moving chess pieces around and you're one of those pieces. So that's why I think entrepreneurs have trained themselves, and I think artists are really good at this too, and athletes, all the people that have to live in the flow state for a living. They've trained themselves to release certainty and enter that flow. And the Taoists have a lot of amazing ways to speak about this. Wu Wei. The master does nothing, and yet nothing is left undone. So you're not efforting, you're not forcing it. And this is the limitation of the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musks. These guys are titans of industry and technology. However, I bet you if you sat them down and they were being actually radically honest, the biggest deals, the biggest moments, those huge insights, they weren't forcing it. They weren't like, it must be done, blah, blah, blah. And these guys are the titans of the Western model, this thing that is giving you data always. And so you must play in both worlds to be successful. I think anyone who knows that.
That was really good.
There's a lot there.
No, there's really good. And what comes up for me is, did you hear about Charles Darwin's journaling that he went through to decide whether he wanted to get married or not? So I find this really fascinating, and for the audience, if you don't know what it is, there's literally his journals, his personal journals, where he was talking to himself and working through a pros and cons list for whether he wanted to get married or not. And I find this really fascinating because his journal entries very much from a logical point of view, like you look at the end of it and it was like, don't get married. Like you could be one of the best scientists and minds of the world, and like it was relating, I think there was a point saying something along the lines of like, it might be better than having a dog. Like having a wife might be better than having a dog. And then there was, what if she doesn't want to live where they wanted to live, which they ended up moving? What happens if they have children and he suffers the despair and loss of a child dying, which he actually went through? But then after you went through that process, there is like a stream of consciousness where he just like emotionally dumps down everything and is just like, do it, get married. And he ends up getting married to his cousin, I'm pretty sure as well.
Interesting.
And I find that fascinating because logically, analytically, he tried to work through that process. And I see within myself times where I can be too analytical with my thinking, and it's almost like my analytical thinking, its shadow side of it will come through and overpower, because there is a sense of, especially when we want to be able to think about why we're going to make a decision or what decision that we're going to make, ultimately all of that thinking gives us a feeling that actually leads us to the decision that we make at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. How do you help others go through that when you're coaching people, when even with yourself as well? What is the process like, and your inner dialogue as you go through that to be able to get to the outcome that you want?
Yeah, I love this question. You know, there's an amazing author, Ian McGilchrist. He wrote The Master and His Emissary.
Yeah, I've recently. That's a big one. I haven't
it's
completely gone through it.
I haven't gotten through it.
Yeah.
Like I'm just like chunking it a little bit. But I mean, he has the big thing about right-left hemisphere dominance in this whole model, which I find fascinating. But to me, the philosophical implications are more interesting, which is, call it heart, soul, your innermost being is the master. It's giving you the map. And so for me, that my key word there is surrender. Surrender to God, surrender to life. Hey, like show me, like what is it? And you do know, everyone knows. I think a lot of people are good at pretending they don't know, but it's there, you know? Having a practice, meditation, prayer, something, you know, yoga, whatever, breath work, helps you tune into it. So that's important. You must surrender to what's there. There's already a map, there's already, you know, a destiny line, or however you want to conceptualize it. However, the execution side, the 3D logistics, the action comes from the servant or the emissary, which is the mind. And especially as a man, as a masculine being in a masculine body, it's logos. Like my language, my thinking, my analysis, my vision is very important, and that's going to execute the plan. And I just have to trust, and this is where being decisive, so surrender, decide. In a surrendered state of receptivity, being decisive, right? And this is very Taoist. This is yin and yang. Yin, which is space, dark matter all around, is titanic. It's huge. It's pregnant with energy. The yang, you know, arises for a time, blossoms with spring, acts, and then recedes. And so I've trained myself kind of, even though there's feast, famine, financially and energetically that comes with that, which tests your mettle, obviously. But every time when I look back, if I got the heart GPS, the soul speak online, and it showed me, all right, this is what you're doing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. And then I try to execute on that, block, resistance. And then I'm like, all right, fine. And then synchronicity, quantum leap, providence, protection. You know, one of my mantras is there's protection in your purpose. If you follow the lifeline of the most energy that you know in your heart is true, and you just execute on it from ego, from mind, which is sacred, there's nothing wrong with those, you're going to be provided for. And you're going to be protected from the negative chaos that might exist around you financially, emotionally, whatever. That's been my experience.
That's really good. That's really good. There's eloquence to what it is that you say, and I really appreciate that. There is protection. Sorry, it was protection?
There's protection in your purpose.
In your purpose.
Like it's basically the idea of just going all out on offense, aligned offense. Like stop playing defense. Like some people are playing defense, saving, hoarding their money, not going out, not connecting to others. Because that's a scarce view. And life, you know, there's the hilarious saying, I don't know who it said, but it's like, you know, the guy's praying every day to God, like, please, I want to get rich. And God's like, you could help me out here. You could at least go buy a lottery ticket. You know, life wants to meet you halfway. So if you play defense, you just limit your options. It's like chess. You're putting yourself in a position where there's not a lot of moves.
It's interesting when you say that. What comes up for me was there were two epiphanies, realizations that I strongly had. So closing date with the business was past Thursday, and for me, I truly understood the phrase "everything changes, but nothing changes," and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And it was just me getting back on with it. I already knew what I wanted to do moving forward. Like, it was just like okay, great, keep going sort of thing. To be perfectly honest, I'm not great at celebrating and that sort of stuff as well. There's always like a moving forward with it, so I know there's something that I need to work on with that. But there's also the second part, which is right now the feeling, a knowing of, oh, now I'm getting started. Like, now I'm actually being able to like really get into it and hit my straps, which has been really interesting, empowering as well, to feel like, oh, like I am on purpose now. Like, I am doing what it is that I want to be doing, and it'll be very interesting because putting out this into the public will be really interesting in some near future, because maybe I completely fail and fall on my face and all sorts of things, and so be it, to be perfectly honest, which is why I want to document this process from here. But it's great to have someone like yourself articulate so well that message around purpose, because I do feel like that was one of my areas that I had struggled with for quite some time, and knowing how good it felt having that come back into alignment. So how do you help if you're coaching someone, let's say a man, if there's any more specifics between a man or a woman, but you're coaching a dude and you see that he's out of alignment with his purpose, he's not on purpose, how do you help get that clarity?
Yeah. First way that's coming up, it's kind of the way I did it, is you have to find where the emotion is. So emotion, energy and motion, it's your compass. Now, there's a difference between like the day-to-day emotion, like the ebb and flows, which is present for everyone. Like, oh fuck, like this is happening. I'm feeling a thing. It's like, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about what Freud calls the Titanic feeling, or the sense of like, you know, it's the awe, it's that whoa, that kind of emotion. That lives somewhere in your life right now, and that's a little beep, beep, that's gonna point you in the North Star. So we have to find that. I like writing. Like, if you just write long enough, especially if you write a letter to your future self, or you even make, like kind of like Darwin did, a pro and con list, and you don't stop, you kind of chug through the 20, 30, 40 minutes of resistance, you'll get to a point where you break down in tears, or the emotion floods in and you're like, fuck, you know, they'll come into Jesus moment. That will happen if you chug through the resistance. Some people are not good at, it's not writing, maybe it's nature, maybe it's a ceremony, maybe it's fasting. Maybe, you know, you got to put yourself in a position where you can resensitize to it. We have to find that. We have to map it. Like, map the territory. Where is it? Okay, it's in this direction. Cool. Now, is your vocation, you know, there's this idea of ikigai. I'm sure you've seen it. It's like the multiple Venn diagrams. We want to get as close to the center as we can. You know, what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid to do, what you enjoy. We need to find the center. So most people have one or two buckets online. You know, they're probably getting paid. They're probably good at something. It may not be aligned with product market fit or what the world wants, per se. That one's tough. It also may not be in line with what you enjoy. Because a lot of people sacrificed, you know, Mom, I want to be a famous guitarist. Oh, you can't do that. There's no money in that. You need to. But we create a battle inside ourselves. So I like the model of creating a side hustle, starting a podcast, starting a blog. If you have a smartphone right now, which if anyone listening or watching this, you have a smartphone, you're better off than a ton of people on the planet, and you got to be grateful. A lot of people are living on $1 a day, don't have clean water, and that's still real, 2022, which to me is baffling. You can get started today on something that will scratch the itch, fill you up, fill your cup on purpose. And I guarantee you, it doesn't need to be monetized at first. In fact, if you try to do that, it could actually kink the hose and you'll cut the energy. So for the masculine too, it helps to have a plan. So I've helped a lot of people in corporate and traditional job roles plan their exit into entrepreneurship through a side hustle, through something like a podcast, blog, or, you know, YouTube channel, and plot their not escape, but plot the transition.
Yeah.
You know, build your life raft, build your lifeboat. It's going to turn into a cruise ship later. Don't just jump off the boat and start treading water. That's a one-way ticket to like anxiety. Although some are called to that.
I appreciate you, dude. You're amazing. This has been a very, very interesting and intriguing and fascinating conversation for me. I want to be able to have many, many more. So thank you. I appreciate you and I really respect you. I dived into as much as you work before this conversation and I was just like, oh, I like this. I really like it a lot. Where does the viewer right now, where do we go to find out more and what it is that you do?
Really honored to be here. This is one of the more enjoyable interviews I've had in a while, to be fair. myname.com, Kevin Orosz, Orosz. I'm on all the channels, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok. You know, I make a lot of content, I have my own podcast. A lot of my work centers around male and female dynamics, masculine, feminine, sexual polarity, dating strategy, relationship, and divine union work, which is what I'm really passionate about right now. I also talk a lot about philosophy, entrepreneurship, and you know, some of these topics, which I'm deeply interested in.
There is so much more I want to talk to you about. So if it's cool with you, I'm going to beg, plead, and steal as much as I possibly can to make sure that we can do a part 2 to this.
Amen.
Cool. All right. Amazing.
Thanks, brother.
Nice to speak to you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode. I really, truly hope that you have enjoyed this. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so because it would be a bummer if you'd miss out on the amazing episodes that are going to be coming. And one of the best ways for you to be able to support the show is to leave a review and to be able to share it out on social. And if you do share it out on social, please tag me. My handle is @Chris Dufey. That's Chris, D-U-F-E-Y, as I would love to say a personal thank you for you sharing it out and for you to join us on the show as well. And as always, thank you so much. I feel privileged. I feel thankful. I feel grateful. I feel really blessed being able to do this and being able to have you join us as we figure this stuff out that we call life at the end of the day, and being able to do it with amazing conversations that we do here in this show together as well. So I'm wishing you an amazing day, and I'm really looking forward to us coming together in the next episode.